that's fantastic. What's going on, team? It's Andrew with Red Castle, and we are going to do something a little bit different today. Now, normally we are focused on horticulture and all things botany, but today we're going to talk about how to use your harvest. And considering I have a bit of an Irish and German background, we're going to make some sauerkraut. Stay tuned. Alright, so here we go. I know I'm not going to be in the shot all that much, but y'all would rather see the food anyway. Now, what we have here is what it would appear to be a big old Charlie Foxtrot, and it kind of is. So, these two I did, well, 3. I did about 6 weeks ago, and I had them set on my schedule, and they popped today. And basically, I pulled them all off. I already sampled this one, and it could stand to go a little bit longer. But this is convenient because I have 2 more cabbage ready to make new. And I tend to cycle it like that. That's about the rate that I consume it. 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks. Now, the longer you go, the longer you let this stuff ferment, the softer the cabbage is going to get, but the more sour it's going to get. Now, I like that balance of sour and crunch. And this one is just not quite sour enough, so I'm probably going to let them go just about 2 more weeks. So, but what you need to start with is, to do these small batches, half-gallon jar, a lid, a grommet, and an airlock. I'll get these right out of the way. And as for other equipment, I use a simple kitchen scale, digital, so that way I can take the weight percentage in order to figure out how much salt I'm going to need. Pickling salt. Simple Morton pickling salt. I wouldn't use iodized because iodine kills the bacteria you're trying to encourage. So kosher salt should work. Rock salt, not as effective. You need max surface area, so fine grind is best. And then you're going to need, I've given in, I've tried making it by hand, and I'm not that good at it. So, I use a food processor. It cuts up perfect little ribbons, perfect long strips, exactly what I want. It's cheating, but I don't care. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. Other equipment. You're going to need a bowl, obviously, to put all your stuff in so that you can weigh it. And we're going to get talking into secret ingredients now. Basically, these are things you're not going to find in normal cookbooks. I put in a clove of each in each jar. Fermented garlic. Now you can see this has been fermented since November of 2018. Now it's done fermenting. It's in the fridge. I ferment it for about 6 weeks to a couple months. And that's just regular clove garlic, same 2% solution of brine. And just bathe it in there and let the natural fermentation take place. And this stuff keeps forever and ever. Like, not literally forever, but you know what I mean. I put in a little bit of fresh cracked pepper. And you want fresh cracked because all of those volatile oils that make pepper smell so good, you don't want those to escape. And when you have store-bought ground pepper, most of those oils are already gone. So you get those cracked up and you put them in here, and it just holds it all in. And it's good. Now, to give a little bit of a boost to the bacteria that are going on, and we're trying to foster lactic acid bacteria. That's your basic fermentation bacteria. Tiny little bit of sugar, probably in each jar. Half tablespoon, not even, maybe just a full teaspoon, that's about it. And just a dab of molasses. Now obviously I didn't have any proportions written down for this one, it's just guess. Don't do too much. That's basically, you're better to do less than more because you're going to have a runaway fermentation and you're going to blow one of your airlocks out. I know because I've done it. So there's that. Now for the prime secret ingredient. I hesitate to give this one away, but it is a fantastic one. I had an acquaintance of mine teach me how to do this, or showed me how to do it, and I have just never turned back. Good old-fashioned apple. Now, this is one of the apples grown in our orchard, and if you really want to kick it up with some wild fermentation, you can leave the skin on. I will throw some skin in at the top, as you can see here, to help keep everything below the brine. I put the outer leaves in there and help push it down so that all the good, it's got to stay under the water. It has to be under the water line in order for proper fermentation to take place. Otherwise, you're going to get funky molds growing. And if you get funky molds growing, don't freak out. Just scrape it off. It's not going to hurt you. Nothing pathogenic can grow in that kind of an environment. It's too salty and too acidic. So what I do is old-fashioned, just to get this stuff to the right shape, good old-fashioned peeler, core, slicer. And I just basically get the little curly-Q slice of apples and I chop them up and just mix them right in with the cabbage. Now what we have here is, I think this is a Dutch flathead. Only guessing because it's, well, flat-headed. And this one's good old classic red, which obviously I like both. So one of the basic things I do on here is you take the outer leaves off, and you want to save them. Now, when you do a transfer kind of like this, where you're finishing one off and then you're making a new fresh one, I tend to keep, when I uncork this one, I kept the leaves that I used to hold everything down. This is all loaded with your positive bacteria, and you can just toss that in with the new ones. Use it the same way, because, well, it's an extra boost. But don't need to worry about that too much, because all the bacteria you're looking for naturally already live on the surface of the leaves. So you can wash it off to get the dirt off, but don't use soap, don't scrub it, don't do any of that. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to take the core out and I'm going to quarter it. And same for this one. This one actually might need to be more than quartered. I'm going to run that through the processor, and we're basically going to skip the grunt work because this is supposed to be a quick video. Nobody's got time for that.
2 hours later.
And if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm adamant about, well, not editing. So y'all get to see my mistakes. One being that little red bowl that we were talking about, not quite adequate enough. I always forget just how much volume shredded cabbage takes up. So, 5-gallon bucket. Cleaned out, food grade, it's great. That was the, the green cabbage. The red one is half shredded and I haven't weighed it out completely, but I quartered it, weighed it in increments, and that's how it came out in grams. And we did a 2% salt, so that ended up being 42 grams. I think I went with 43. Now you can go up to 2.5% on salt. I wouldn't go much higher because it'd be too much. So in here we have the 42 grams, plus 10 grams of sugar, plus a couple of twists of, well, pepper. We got our garlic here, which is just going to get chopped up real quick. Now I already crushed them going in, but I give them another crush. And just chop it up nice and fine. And the only thing we have left to do after that is the apple. Now you're not going to catch any of the sweetness typically. Oh, I love how this thing works. It just looks so cool. You're not, as I said, you're not going to catch much of the sweetness once this is all fermented because the bacteria are going to basically eat it all. But you're going to get a little bit of a hint of apple cider vinegar. And just, I think my apple's not on here correct. I probably put it on crooked. Yes, this is great if you have it on not crooked, which I do. Alright, we're going to just pull this out of the way. Allow me to readjust live on, well, not live, but as I said, I'm not editing, so here we go. We are locked. Perfect. One more time. Go nice and slow. I generally leave a little pressure on this because it has a little spring in it, but that spring can be a little dense. Can't really find much better to... When it works, it is faster than just about anything else for peeling. And it still is coming off in weird ways. Alright, plan B. Alright team, this is what we call plan B. Funny thing about last year's apples is when they get a little, well, when they've sat in cold storage for a while, they get a little mealy in the core. So the central part of that, those 3 prongs were just spinning, just tearing it all up. But we are a culture of innovate, adapt, and overcome. And that's kind of what this whole channel is about, is resiliency and learning to overcome this crap. So we're just going to do this. A little bit of, nothing fancy. I only had a little bit of strip left on, but when those apple peelers work to their best, they're fantastic. And I've actually taken the coring blade off, and they work really good for potatoes too. And you can leave the coring blade on and actually make a pretty decent curly fries. Alright, I'm going to get the core here. Now I use this little bugger because it gives me consistency. Here's our good pieces here. All this is going to the compost. Now I am going to save a few pieces of skin because I do want to get some of that wild fermentation going on. So, real simple, we're just going to fast chop her up. Nothing too fancy, it's got to be perfect. Alright. Here we go here. Alright, perfect. Well, not perfect, but you know, it'll do. Now we're going to take all of this, throw it in the bucket. This is the hilarious part. We're using a bucket. But to be honest, I've actually used these for 5-gallon buckets to ferment a very large batch of kraut before. And that batch I think went for 3 months or so. Now we're gonna get this stuff out of the way. Let's move that off camera. Take a few of these, this is just enough. That's more than enough to get your wild fermentation going on here. Now, garlic, salt, sugar. We're going to sprinkle that on, a little bit of pepper. And then we're going to take a drop, really very little. That right there is enough. Now here's a little trick. You're going to want to wipe this down because I've had that molasses pretty much super glue the lid down to it. So why don't you prevent yourself some future pain by thinking ahead? Also what we're about over here. Now this is the fun part. See all that? We're just going to mash it in. You gotta try to get it all mixed up. You can mash the apple, you can mash you gotta get all the salt in, try to get underneath and get it turned without losing any of it. Now normally I'd be doing this flat, but I kinda want you to see what's going on in here. You're literally just twisting your hand and making a fist. You're crunching it down. Nothing fancy. You want that salt just worked right into it. Because the salt, you're going to notice right away that salt is going to start making it sweat. And all the water that is trapped inside the cells of the cabbage are going to come pouring on out. And that is what makes your brine. Now typically, if you get a good, well-grown cabbage, you're going to have more than enough brine. Fresh cabbage works well because the longer it's sat, the more it dehydrates. You want water naturally in there. But if the cabbage has been grown really well, it should also have a lot of moisture content. Because you don't want to have to add brine. It's just a pain in the butt to mix it up and use it. But simple 2% brine, nothing fancy. Alright. Wooden spoon. A lot of people have a masher type deal, whatever. I don't. Wooden spoon. Nothing fancy. That's already been sanitized ahead of time, and I don't sanitize with soap or anything. I use boiling water. My hot electric tea kettle, pour it in, swish it around, good to go. You can use you can use the dry cycle on your dishwasher as well, I'm sure. But I'm just going to show you a little bit of this, and then we're going to finish the rest. Pack it in ever so. Get some layers in there. You don't got to be all that gentle with it because you are smashing it. Pull that off. Use your spoon. You want to jam it down. Work it down around the sides. Trying to take out as much of the air space as possible. Now that is where a masher would come in handy, and I'll probably get one eventually. I'm just not overly concerned with it right now. Now when this is all done, the fermentation, the apples are going to come apart. You're not even going to be able to notice that you have the apples in there, so. Alright, that's good for now. How bad was that in the shot the whole damn time? Of course. Alright. So we just pack some of this in here. And if you wanted to, you could throw more garlic in than I use. I just use 1 clove. Do a couple extra twists of pepper if you got it. I don't mind that either. Actually, I'll do a little bit more in here. I like pepper. I like lots of pepper. You can just do it straight on in here. Again, fresh cracked. Always want to use the fresh cracked. You can use a spoon to stir it all up. Nothing fancy. People make, I say nothing fancy a lot because a lot of folks make this stuff far more complicated than it need be. If Vikings can do this, because Vikings did, that's the whole reason Vikings did not get scurvy, is because one of their primary foods that they brought with them was fermented cabbage. And believe it or not, fermented cabbage has a boatload of, no pun intended. Yeah, I really didn't mean that. That just kind of worked out. Anyway, fermented cabbage has a whole load of vitamin C in it. So there you go, staves off scurvy. Alright team, it has been 24 hours and I wanted to show you what the results are so far. And if you can see that, we already have a little bit of bubbling going on there. It's hard to see in here, but there is some bubbles forming, and that's the CO2 being purged out. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how an airlock works, the CO2 that the lactic acid bacteria produce is going to bubble up here, displace all the oxygen, push on through this, through the bell, through the liquid, and CO2 will vent out. No more atmosphere gets in, and it will vent it without creating pressure in here. Now, one thing you can have happen, especially with the red kraut, is you get too vigorous of a reaction, it'll fill this up with the red brine. It's not going to hurt anything. You just clean it out, take the lid off, put fresh water in, put it back together. It'll quickly purge out the oxygen, and you're not going to have a problem. Now, the last step that I didn't show earlier that I'm going to show now. This is our little guy here. I'll take that off real quick. One of the key elements is we want to keep the kraut below the brine. Now, it does have a tendency to want to float. Anything that's above the brine and exposed to atmosphere is going to start to mold. Now, that will not harm, if you get mold, it will not harm your kraut overall. It's not going to spoil it. It's not going to make you sick or anything like that. It's just an aerobic mold. It's the spores and stuff that we breathe in. It's everywhere. But the way to avoid it is I always save the outer leaves of the cabbage, and I use them as a weight. Simply put, you just put them right in the middle here, fold them in, and start pressing them down. 2 big ones tends to be enough. And you just push it down, and they kind of brace. And if you can see, it'll hold all of the good kraut under. It'll hold all of the good kraut under the brine where we want it. Then you just cap it. And what I'm going to do with one of these is label it so you know what it is, when you made it, and when you're supposed to check it. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So, appreciate your time, and see you again later, guys. Stay frosty, team.